had killed beings from 47 different species across the galaxy. Each assassination was a work of art, planned with surgical precision and executed without a trace of emotion. The crime syndicate paid him well for his services, and his reputation preceded him wherever he went. No target had ever escaped him. No contract had ever gone unfulfilled. Until now, the holographic display flickered to life in his private chamber aboard the stealth ship Silent Whisper. His handler, a grotesque named, materialized before him with the familiar sneer that meant another lucrative job. "My most valued asset," his voice wheezed through his breathing apparatus. "I have a contract that will make you the wealthiest assassin in 3 sectors." His 4 eyes remained fixed on his weapon maintenance. His chitinous fingers worked with practiced efficiency, calibrating his plasma rifle's targeting system. Species, location, threat level. Human, a backwater planet called Earth in the Sol system. The target is a former military officer named. He's been problematic for our operations. For the first time in his career, paused. He had heard whispers about humans in the darker corners of the galaxy. Strange stories that seemed too absurd to believe. Tales of impossible endurance, reckless bravery, and an unsettling tendency to survive situations that should have killed them. "Human," he repeated, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "I have never encountered one." His expression grew more serious. "That's why this contract pays 10 million credits. The previous 3 assassins we sent never returned. Their ships were found drifting in space, completely disabled but undamaged. No sign of the crews." His primary eyes narrowed. "You're telling me that 3 professional killers, equipped with military-grade hardware, were defeated by a single human?" "Is no ordinary human. He was part of something called the Special Forces during their recent war with the Empire. The humans, they did things that shouldn't have been possible. They won battles they had no right to win." The assassin set down his weapon and turned his full attention to the hologram. In his line of work, reputation was everything, and failure was not an option. But the promise of 10 million credits was too tempting to ignore, despite the unusual circumstances. "What makes this human so dangerous?" Transmitted a data package to his neural implant. Images and reports flooded his consciousness. Age 34, stood just over 6 feet tall with unremarkable brown hair and dark eyes. He looked ordinary, disappointingly so. But the combat reports told a different story. During the war, had single-handedly held a strategic mountain pass for 3 days against impossible odds. He had survived in hostile environments that would have killed most species within hours. He had infiltrated enemy installations that were considered impregnable. "The humans call it stubbornness," explained. "Their inability to recognize when they should logically give up. It's a species-wide madness that makes them unpredictable and dangerous." Studied the tactical assessments. His current location: a small agricultural settlement on Earth's northern continent. Population fewer than 2,000. He's been living quietly there for 2 years since the war ended. No security detail, no obvious defenses. It should be simple. The word "should" hung in the air like a warning. In his experience, contracts that appeared simple were often the most dangerous. But his pride as the galaxy's most feared assassin wouldn't allow him to refuse. "I accept the contract. Transfer half the payment to my account." His mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his species. "Excellent. I knew I could count on you. Just be careful. The humans have a saying, never corner a wounded animal. I suspect it applies to their entire species." After the transmission ended, spent the next several hours studying everything available about humans and their home planet. Earth was a Class M world with standard gravity and atmosphere, inhabited by a single dominant species that had somehow managed to achieve faster-than-light travel despite being relative newcomers to the galactic community. What troubled him most were the seemingly contradictory reports. Humans were described as both peaceful farmers and terrifying warriors, as logical scientists and emotional poets, as fragile beings who could somehow endure impossible hardships. They didn't fit any recognized pattern of intelligent life. The Silent Whisper dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system 3 days later. Earth hung before him like a blue-green jewel, deceptively beautiful and peaceful. No orbital defense platforms, no military patrols, no signs of the advanced technology that had allowed humans to defeat the mighty empire. Ship easily bypassed the primitive sensor networks and entered the atmosphere under full stealth. The target's location was a farming community called Cedar Falls, nestled in a valley between rolling hills covered in something the humans called forests. He observed the settlement from orbit for several hours, mapping patrol routes and identifying potential escape paths. Lived alone in a modest dwelling on the outskirts of town, surrounded by fields of grain that swayed gently in the wind. No guards, no obvious weapons, no apparent awareness that death was approaching. Too easy, far too easy. Landed his ship in a dense forest several kilometers from the target zone as night fell across the valley. He donned his stealth suit and activated his cloaking device, becoming virtually invisible to most forms of detection. His plasma rifle hummed quietly with lethal energy, and his collection of specialized weapons hung from his belt like the tools of his deadly trade. The forest was unlike anything he had encountered before. Instead of the sterile, controlled environments of most civilized worlds, this place teemed with wild life. Strange creatures called owls hooted in the darkness, while smaller animals rustled through the undergrowth. The very air seemed alive with sounds and scents. He moved through the terrain with professional skill, avoiding the primitive motion sensors and camera systems that the humans used for wildlife observation. Their technology was laughably outdated compared to his equipment, and he reached the perimeter of his property without detection. The target's home was a simple wooden structure that would have been considered primitive housing on most worlds. Warm light glowed from the windows, and smoke rose from a chimney into the star-filled sky. Through his thermal imaging, could see a single humanoid figure moving about inside. Appeared to be preparing a meal, completely unaware that death had come calling. He moved with the casual efficiency of someone comfortable in his environment, occasionally pausing to look out the windows at the peaceful night. There was nothing in his demeanor to suggest the legendary warrior described in the combat reports. Positioned himself in an optimal sniping location, approximately 400 meters from the target. His plasma rifle's scope provided perfect visibility through the dwelling's walls, and the targeting computer confirmed a clear shot. One squeeze of the trigger, and the contract would be complete. But something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was professional curiosity, or maybe the strange feeling that this was all too simple. He decided to observe longer to better understand his prey before striking. That decision would prove to be a critical mistake. As he watched through his scope, suddenly stopped what he was doing and turned toward the window. For a moment, the human seemed to be looking directly at its position, despite the distance and the assassin's advanced cloaking technology. Then smiled. It wasn't the expression of someone who suspected danger. It was the smile of someone who had been expecting a visitor. The human walked to his front door, opened it, and called out into the darkness. "I know you're out there. Whoever sent you, they didn't tell you the whole truth about humans, did they? You might want to reconsider your career choices while you still can." His four hearts began beating faster. No target had ever detected his presence before. The cloaking technology was military-grade, designed to fool even the most sophisticated sensors. Yet somehow this unremarkable human farmer had not only spotted him, but seemed completely unconcerned about the threat. Stepped out onto his porch and sat down in a wooden chair, apparently settling in for a conversation with an invisible assassin. "I'm guessing you're not local, probably not even from this galaxy, judging by the energy signature of your ship. Someone paid you good money to kill me, right?" The casual nature of the human's words was more unsettling than any threat. Kept his weapon trained on the target while trying to understand what was happening. This behavior didn't match any of the tactical profiles in his database. "Here's the thing," continued, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "Humans have this really bad habit of not dying when we're supposed to. We're stubborn that way. Your employers probably didn't mention that, did they?" His training told him to take the shot immediately to end this conversation before it could continue. But curiosity stayed his hand. In 47 successful assassinations, no target had ever behaved like this. "Let me guess," the human said, leaning back in his chair. "You're wondering how I spotted you. Trade secret, I'm afraid. But I'll give you some free advice. Whoever sent you didn't send you here to kill me. They sent you here to die." His finger tightened on the trigger, but his final words echoed in his mind. The human's casual confidence was unlike anything he had encountered in decades of assassination work. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that he was walking into a carefully prepared trap. "You're thinking about taking the shot," called out, somehow reading the assassin's thoughts across 400 meters of darkness. "I don't blame you. It's what you were paid to do. But before you pull that trigger, let me ask you something. What happened to the other three?" The question hit like a physical blow. How could this human possibly know about the previous assassins? That information was classified at the highest levels of the crime syndicate. Stood up from his chair and walked to the edge of his porch, his hands clearly visible and empty of weapons. Or of the Blade, disappeared 6 months ago. Lee the Silent Death, vanished 4 months ago. And my personal favorite and the Unstoppable. He lasted exactly 12 hours on Earth before his ship went dark. Each name sent a chill through exoskeleton. These were legendary assassins, beings whose reputations were known throughout the criminal underworld. If was telling the truth, then 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous killers had simply vanished. "You want to know what they all had in common?" asked, his voice carrying a note of genuine sympathy. "They underestimated humans, same mistake your employers are making right now." Finally found his voice, speaking through his suit's external communicators. "You're bluffing. No single being could defeat 3 professional assassins." Slav was surprisingly warm and entirely without malice. "You're right. One human couldn't do that, but I'm not alone out here, friend. I never was." The night around suddenly came alive with movement. His thermal imaging detected at least a dozen heat signatures emerging from concealed positions throughout the forest. They had been there all along, invisible even to his advanced sensors, waiting with the patience of natural predators. "Former Special Forces," explained conversationally. "We all moved to Cedar Falls after the war ended. Funny thing about soldiers, we don't really retire, we just find new ways to serve." His training kicked in and he swiveled his weapon toward the nearest heat signature. But before he could fire, something struck his rifle with tremendous force, sending the weapon spinning away into the darkness. The blow had come from behind, impossible given his sensor readings. "Motion trackers on your left shoulder," a new voice whispered directly in his ear. "Thermal dampener on the right, night vision enhancement behind your primary eyes. We've been watching you watch us for the past hour." Spun around to find a human female standing just 3 feet away. She was smaller than, dressed in simple civilian clothing, but her eyes held the same calm confidence. More unsettling still, she had somehow approached him without triggering any of his detection systems. "Sarah Martinez," she introduced herself pleasantly. "Explosive Ordnance Disposal Specialist, retired. I've been studying your ship's defenses while you've been playing sniper. Interesting design, but I found 14 critical vulnerabilities in the first 10 minutes. Panic began to creep into his consciousness, a sensation he hadn't experienced in decades. His hand moved to the backup weapon on his belt, but another human voice stopped him. "I wouldn't do that," said a man who materialized from what had appeared to be empty air. "Tom Bradley, former reconnaissance specialist. I've got your power core targeted with a rather large explosive device. Move wrong, and your ship becomes a very expensive firework." More humans emerged from concealment, each one appearing as if by magic from the seemingly empty forest. They moved with the fluid grace of apex predators, their casual demeanor belied by the deadly competence in their movements. Walked closer, his hands still visibly empty. "You see, when the Empire decided to invade our little backwater planet, they made a critical error in judgment. They assumed that because we were technologically inferior, we would be easy to conquer." The human paused at the edge of the forest, just 20 meters from his position. "They learned the hard way that technology isn't everything. Sometimes it's the crazy species that refuses to stay down that wins the war." His mind raced through possible escape scenarios, but each path was blocked by human soldiers who seemed to anticipate his every thought. His stealth suit, his weapons, his advanced technology, none of it mattered against opponents who fought like they had nothing to lose. "The thing about humans," continued, "is that we're really, really good at learning from our mistakes. After the first assassin showed up, we started preparing for the others. After the second one, we began tracking the pattern. By the third, we knew exactly who was sending them and why." A terrible realization began to dawn on. This was a trap. The entire contract was a setup. "Now you're getting it," said with approval. See, the crime syndicate has been expanding into human space, thinking we'd be easy prey. They've been enslaving our colonists, stealing our resources, and generally making nuisances of themselves. Sarah Martinez appeared at its other side, having moved silently through the undergrowth. We tried diplomatic solutions first, filed complaints with the Galactic Council, requested mediation, followed all the proper channels. Know what we got: bureaucratic runaround and empty promises. Tom Bradley's voice came from somewhere in the darkness. So we decided to solve the problem ourselves. When crime syndicates send assassins after you, the logical response is to send a message back. A really clear message. Stopped walking and turned to face directly. We want you to go back to your employers with a simple proposition. They stop their operations in human space immediately, release all human prisoners, and compensate the families they've harmed. In return, we'll forget this ever happened. And if they refuse? Asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The human's smile never wavered, but something cold and dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then we'll come visiting, and trust me, we're much better at hunting than we are at farming. Looked around at the humans surrounding him, trying to understand how they had so completely outmaneuvered him. How? My equipment is military grade, my training is flawless. How did you detect me? You want the technical answer or the simple one? Asked. Both. Gestured toward the forest around them. Technical answer. We've been living in this environment for 2 years. We know every sound, every scent, every natural pattern. When something doesn't belong, we notice. Your ship's engines left ionization traces in the upper atmosphere. Your landing compressed soil in patterns that don't match local wildlife. Your movement through the forest displaced air currents that our sensors detected. Sarah Martinez chuckled softly. Simple answer. You're not the first alien who thought he could sneak up on a human. We've gotten pretty good at spotting the signs. But your technology is centuries behind ours, protested. Your sensors are primitive, your weapons are crude. That's your first mistake, Tom Bradley said, emerging from the shadows with a device that looked like a simple handheld scanner. Assuming that advanced technology automatically means superior capability. You rely on your gadgets, we rely on ourselves. Nodded towards cloaking suit. That's a beautiful piece of equipment, probably cost more than most planets' annual budgets. But it has a fatal flaw. It's designed to fool machines, not organic senses. Humans still hunt with our eyes, our ears, our noses. We notice things that your computers miss. The assassin's worldview began to crumble as he realized the scope of his miscalculation. Everything he had believed about superior technology, about the natural order of predator and prey, was being systematically dismantled by a group of farmers who had once been soldiers. The previous assassins, he asked quietly, what happened to them? His expression became more serious. Or is currently working on a farm about 50 kilometers from here. Turns out he's got a natural talent for growing vegetables. Who knew? Lee opened a small restaurant in town, Sarah added. Makes the best cuisine this side of the galaxy. The spices are incredible. And Anne's voice was barely a whisper. Tom Bradley grinned, teaching hand-to-hand combat to the local security forces. Apparently being unstoppable is a lot less impressive when your opponents refuse to stay stopped. The humans had done something that violated every principle of interstellar law and criminal protocol. They had converted enemy assassins into productive members of society. It was so absurd, so completely contrary to galactic norms, that couldn't process it. You're offering me the same choice, he realized. Nodded. Your ship's weapons systems have been quietly disabled while we've been talking. Your communication array has been modified to send only the messages we approve. Your navigation computer now has some very specific limitations. You can go back to your employers with our message, or you can stay here and learn what it's like to be human. Looked at his hands, at his weapons, at the advanced technology that had made him the most feared assassin in 3 sectors. All of it was useless against opponents who fought with their minds instead of their machines, who turned enemies into friends instead of simply eliminating them. For the first time in his adult life, the killer known has found himself completely and utterly outmatched. The silence stretched between them for several long moments as wrestled with a decision that would define the rest of his existence. Around him, the humans waited with the patient confidence of people who had already won a victory that went far beyond simple combat. I don't understand, he finally admitted. Why not simply kill me? It would send the same message to and it would eliminate a threat to your people. Exchanged glances with his companions before answering. Because that's not who we are. Humans have a saying, the best way to destroy an enemy is to make him a friend. We've found it to be remarkably effective. His mandibles clicked in confusion. But I came here to murder you. I have killed 47 beings across the galaxy. I am a weapon designed for death. Sarah Martinez corrected gently. You were those things. What you are now is up to you. The assassin looked around at the faces surrounding him, searching for some sign of the deception or manipulation he expected. Instead, he saw only genuine concern and, impossibly, hope. These humans actually believed they could transform one of the galaxy's most dangerous killers into something better. The others who came before me asked slowly. They truly chose to stay. Tom Bradley stepped closer, his weapon lowered but ready. Or was the hardest to convince. Spent 3 weeks trying to figure out how to escape before he realized we weren't keeping him prisoner. Lee adapted faster. Turns out cooking and assassination require similar attention to detail. And N had always wanted to teach, added. He just never knew there were alternatives to killing for a living. Amazing how much violence comes from people who simply don't know there are other options. His worldview continued to fracture as he processed this information. In his culture, in the criminal underworld where he had spent his entire adult life, enemies were eliminated or they eliminated you. The concept of transformation, of choosing to become something fundamentally different, was so alien that he struggled to comprehend it. What would you have me do? He asked. I know nothing but death. I have no skills beyond assassination. Smiled and for the first time saw genuine warmth in the expression instead of tactical calculation. That's where you're wrong. You have incredible patience, perfect attention to detail, and the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. Those are valuable skills in any profession. Plus, Sarah added with a grin, you've got 4 eyes and perfect balance. Ever considered becoming a surgeon? Dr. Wilson at the medical clinic has been complaining about not having enough hands during complex operations. The suggestion was so absurd that almost laughed. An assassin becoming a healer. It violated every principle of cosmic irony he understood. Yet as he thought about it, he realized the skills were remarkably similar. Precise movements, steady hands, the ability to work under intense pressure. You're serious, he said, not quite a question. Completely serious, confirmed. The galaxy is full of people trying to destroy things. We need more people who know how to build them, how to fix them, how to make them better. Looked down at his hands, still enclosed in his advanced combat suit. These fingers had pulled triggers, thrown knives, mixed poisons. Could they really learn to save lives instead of taking them? They will not simply accept my defection, he pointed out. They will send others, more assassins, possibly an entire strike force. Let them come, Tom Bradley said with casual confidence. Earth's gotten pretty good at handling unwanted visitors lately. Plus, we'll have inside information about their tactics and technology. You would trust me with such information, after everything I've done. Stepped forward until he was close enough to place a hand on his armored shoulder. Trust is earned, not given, but everyone deserves the chance to earn it. The question is, are you willing to try? The weight of the decision pressed down on like a physical force. Everything he had been, everything he had believed about himself and the universe, hung in the balance. He could return to deliver the human's message, and continue his life as a killer. Or he could step into an unknown future where former enemies offered redemption without condition. If I stay, he said slowly, if I attempt this transformation you speak of, what guarantee do I have that you won't simply kill me when I'm no longer useful? None, answered honestly. Just like we have no guarantee that you won't try to kill us in our sleep. But here's the thing about humans, we're really good at taking chances on people. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But we keep trying because the alternative is to live in a universe where redemption is impossible. Sarah Martinez nodded in agreement. Besides, you'll be living among people who made the same choice. Or Lee N, they're all part of our community now. They understand what you're going through because they've been there. The concept of community was almost as foreign to as the idea of redemption. In his world, alliances were temporary, and trust was a weakness that got you killed. The thought of belonging somewhere, of being accepted despite his past, was both terrifying and strangely appealing. What of my ship? He asked. My weapons? Your ship will be modified for civilian use, Tom explained. The weapon systems will be removed, but we'll leave the engines and life support intact. Think of it as a very expensive farming transport. Your personal weapons will be destroyed, added, but if you decide to stay, we'll teach you to use tools that create instead of destroy. Medical instruments, agricultural equipment, construction tools. Looked around at the humans one more time, seeing them not as targets or enemies, but as individuals who had chosen to offer him something he had never expected to find. Hope. I have one condition, he said finally. The humans tensed slightly, ready for some impossible demand or hidden trap. I want to speak with the others first, or Li En. I need to understand how they made this transition before I can commit to it myself. Smile was brilliant in the darkness. Absolutely. In fact, I think you'll find they've been waiting to meet you. They've all been where you are right now. As dawn broke over the valley, found himself walking through the streets of Cedar Falls beside former enemies who had somehow become protectors. His stealth suit had been deactivated, his weapons secured, but for the first time in decades, he felt truly safe. The town was awakening around them, and humans emerged from their homes to begin another day of peaceful existence. Children ran past on their way to school, completely unaware that one of the galaxy's most feared assassins was walking among them. The normality of it all was profoundly unsettling and strangely comforting. There's Or. Sarah pointed toward a figure working in a large garden behind the medical clinic. The former assassin was on his knees in the dirt, carefully tending to rows of vegetables with the same precision he had once applied to planning murders. When Or looked up and saw, his expression shifted from concentration to understanding. He stood slowly, brushing soil from his hands, and walked over to the newcomer. Another one comes to the crossroads, Or said in the old dialect. I wondered when the humans would catch you. They say you chose to stay, replied in the same language. I find this difficult to believe. Or gestured toward his garden, toward the growing plants that would soon feed the community. I was like you once. I believed that death was the only truth, that strength came from the ability to take life. Then I learned that creating life requires much greater strength. They talked for hours while observed the daily routines of the converted assassins. Lee showed him the intricate spice blends that had made her restaurant famous throughout the region, her deadly precision now focused on creating flavors instead of poisons. En demonstrated defensive techniques to young security officers, teaching them to protect instead of destroy. Each former killer had found a way to use their deadly skills for constructive purposes. More importantly, they had found acceptance among people who knew exactly what they had been, but chose to focus on what they could become. The hardest part, En explained during a quiet moment, is learning to forgive yourself. The humans make it easier because they don't judge you for your past, but you still have to live with what you've done. How do you manage it? Asked. By making sure that every life I protect, every person I teach to defend themselves, balances the scales just a little bit more. I can't undo the past, but I can choose what kind of future I create. As the day progressed, began to understand what the humans had accomplished. They hadn't simply captured their enemies. They had shown them a different way to exist in the universe. They had proven that even the most hardened killers could choose to become something better. When evening came, stood once again on his porch, but this time as a guest rather than a predator. The humans sat beside him, both of them watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. So, said quietly, what's your decision? Thought about his ship, waiting in the forest with its weapons disabled and its communication array modified. He could still leave, could still return to with their message. He could resume his old life, continue to be the feared assassin he had always been. Or he could stay and discover what it meant to be something more. I want to learn, he said finally. I want to understand how to create instead of destroy. I want to find out what it means to belong somewhere. Nodded as if he had expected this answer all along. Welcome to Earth, Doctor. I think you're going to like it here. The former assassin looked at his hands one more time, imagining them holding medical instruments instead of weapons, healing instead of harming. It would be the greatest challenge of his life, learning to save the lives he had once been paid to take. But as he looked around at the peaceful community that had welcomed him despite knowing exactly what he was, realized that some challenges were worth accepting. Some transformations were worth the risk. For the first time in his memory, the galaxy's most feared assassin allowed himself to hope for a future where he could become something better than what he had always been. And in a small farming town on a backwater planet, surrounded by humans who believed in the possibility of redemption, that hope began to grow into something real. The message to the would wait. Tonight there was a new life to begin and a better universe to build, one converted assassin at a time.